On this first episode of First Founders, Ryan Dognaux, the CEO of the Thrifty Bot, is on to talk about his journey through First and, well, really our relationship going back over 20 years. Talking about how Ryan was a student, going into it as an alumni, working events as well too, and how the Thrifty Bot started out, how some of the product development went, and maybe some of the future plans for the Thrifty Bot as well too. So stick around, let's learn more about the Thrifty Bot here on First Founders. This video on fun is brought to you by viewers like you and also in partnership with the following. Discover how Kettering University students engineer their success with Kettering's amazing co-op employment programs where students earn great pay and gain valuable experience. Those accepted into Kettering University can apply for a robotics scholarship, providing up to an additional $5,000 a year in tuition assistance. Head on over to kettering.edu/first to learn more and apply. First Updates Now has become the Fun Robotics Network. Check us out at funroboticsnetwork.com and all the social links that you see above here. And check out some of our new merchandise options that are both fun and robotics related as well too, both on our website and right underneath this YouTube video. Welcome to First Founders, a revamped podcast on fun featuring those who are making an impact either in First or from First or have done something great in the community for things as well too. And I really can't think of a better first guest when I was thinking about who we're going to have come on this to revamp this. I'm thinking all the way back to when I was a student, and well, he was a student as well too. Coming back in from 2002, Ryan's when he started on here. So it's Ryan Dognaux, owner at the Thrifty Bot. And Ryan, I'm not sure about this. I think we've talked about this before, but you might be my longest first friend. Actually going back to things as well, like outside of like my own team, you know, that I was an alumni from and that sort of thing. Do you have any clue how like we started talking? Was it Chief Delphi? Like, what was it, man?
I think it was Chief Delphi or, you know, one of the things, communication platforms. There were a couple back then. But yeah, I think it was like 2004, 2005, Midwest Regional kind of like potential meetup or something. I'm not sure. It was so long ago.
I mean, but, and you and I were both in digital animation, right? So like, which is something that is still kind of around, but not nearly as big as I think it used to be for things. And I know I moved off digital animation my senior year, so that was 2004. So yeah, I was trying to think back, like, well, it had to be meeting somewhere or doing something like that. And you and I, like, I mean, we go way back, man. We MCGA'd an event way back in like 2007 or something like that. Like,
2007 during school. Me and one of my buddies, we drove up to Wisconsin, and you were MCing, I was game announcing. It's like, well, why did they let us do that?
Staying at a crappy La Quinta Inn way back in the day, things like that. So, good times. So, well, hey man, welcome. Thanks for coming on for this as well to talk more about your journey through First, of course, with the Thrifty Bot as well too. But there's a lot, I think, leading up to that I'd love to hear more about, man. So, how did you even get started in First? I'd love to hear more about your student experience, and then we'll kind of work out of that.
Yeah, sure. So, I got involved in First actually in like 8th grade. That's what they had First Lego League at our middle school. And it was run by the same people that run Cyberblue 234, because the middle school is literally right across the street from the high school. So it was like an after school club, went to it because it sounded cool and, you know, got really into it. And like a lot of people, I'm sure it's kind of a similar story. So then I met, you know, some of the current, back then, some of the students that were on 234 and the mentors, and then they kind of brought you over in the off season to see how you'd fit with the team, and it's kind of like, you know, no turning back at that point. It was awesome.
If I remember correctly, like getting on 234 was a very vetted process, right? Like back in the day.
Yeah. They had student interviews, you know, it was a whole thing. So like every team runs kind of different, but even back then it was kind of like the first interview process I think I actually went through.
And, you know, lead mentor of the team way back in the day, right? Chris Foltz, who's still with 234 as well. And obviously his son, Colin, as well, too, who's the senior director in FRC. It's great. Did you two overlap at all on the team?
Yeah, Colin, if you go back and look at that kind of like 4 to 5 year block on Cyberblue, it's kind of ridiculous. So like Colin's a year ahead of me. And then Ben Martin, who a lot of people know, came a couple years after us. So like there was just like this 4-year window where like, you know, Colin was a senior and like I think Ben was a freshman or something like that. it was like real tight there. And there are just a lot of people that were on Cyberblue that have gone on to do a lot in first and just a lot in general. So it's kind of neat from that perspective. But I mean, think about that from like just every team. I think there's a lot of people that have gone on to do really cool things, not necessarily just in first. Um, but yeah, that 234 team was ridiculous back then.
So it's the Legends of 234 coming out, right? So
Yeah.
that's pretty awesome, man. So on the team itself, so obviously I had a connection through digital animation at the time. Was there anything else you did on the team specifically?
Yeah, so like during build season, it was mostly animation, a little CAD here and there. And then during competition season, I was really focused on scouting strategy. Um, Kind of when I was a freshman, I figured out that scouting was a thing because we didn't really do that yet. And I think the very first competition I went to as a freshman, um, we made some really bad draft alliance selection choices based on my input, and then I took it way seriously after that, right? So you kind of learn the impact of what scouting can do on your team, and that's what I did for 4 years. Kind of built that up from a strategy perspective, and tried to like institute, a lot of pen and paper back then because laptops were kind of mediocre at best and really expensive. So we had spreadsheets that we were kind of running down from the stands to the pits and back and forth to get data. So
Were you behind the glass at all too, or strictly in the stands, like doing scouting stuff?
no, no, I was the only driving I ever did was in the off season. So
Okay.
and we were adult drive coaches back then. So
Makes sense on that. So let's talk about as we continue through. Obviously you graduate, become a first alumni. We talked about how you and I got to do an event together as well too as that combo. But like, lead us up to kind of where the Thrifty Bot is. Like, what did you do after high school for things both in first and outside of first? Take us through that journey a little bit more.
yeah, so it's a long one. I feel like at this point. Um, So yeah, went to school at Purdue, majored in computer graphics technology, and focused really on what they called virtual product integration at the time. It's focusing a lot on CAD, CAM, product data management, product lifecycle management, and kind of the management of all the digital assets that happen in companies with different products. Um, Worked at kind of got my first jobs with Boeing out in Philadelphia, and then ended up moving to St. Louis. So worked at Boeing for about 7 or 8 years, doing a lot of that kind of stuff that I went to school for. Um, and then after that, when Thrifty Bot started to kind of become an idea in my head, at least, was more when we moved back to Indiana. So I kind of got another job with a different company, and then came back here to be back in Indiana with my family. And the way Thrifty Bot started, what like a lot of things, was a Chief Delphi thread, um, which happens. I had saw these guys were, trying to sell hex bearings. They kind of found the source of them that pretty much everyone uses or used at the time. And I started to just research that and kind of go down this rabbit hole of, okay, like, what is this? How do you source things? What's that process? And kind of just dipped the toe, so to speak, and said, hey, I'm going to buy some of these. And one, see if they're any good. And then two, like, compare them quality wise to what's out there in the market at the time, which was like, in 2018, 2019 timeframe. And yeah, just started there. So dipped the toe on the. No, go ahead.
I think a really interesting thing just about that in general is that for many of us who are entrepreneurs and things, it's all about solving a need that's been identified, right?
Mhm.
And when you look at like, mentioned it's a post off of Chief Delphi, and like sometimes it's those just like random ideas sometimes that come in that are like, hey, I could help do something better. I could do it differently. I could do something to help benefit. For things as well. Is that kind of like for you where it came from? Because for me, it was about like, hey, I really want to do more of this, but I want to create something a bit more comprehensive of what's out there right now. How did that spark start for you?
Yeah, I mean, I've been on those teams that have like next to no budget, right? Like, oh, you're always tearing apart old robots every season because that's what you have. That was one thing where I was like, can we not charge $5 for a hex bearing, right? And like, you start looking into other things, and it's like, okay, well, if we can get price points down for teams, then it starts to kind of address the sustainability issues that are pretty prevalent in FRC. Like, if we're honest, it's a super expensive program. The robots are big. Back then you were having to build two of them usually just to even be competitive
Yeah.
because of bag day and that kind of stuff. Um, Now, some of that's, or a lot of that's gone, which I think was a huge plus to helping to raise the floor. Teams don't necessarily have to go build two anymore. But yeah, it was just kind of seeing like teams struggle, right? Especially like the bottom half of FRC teams budget wise. So if we can kind of be this lower cost supplier and help those teams out, like, should be a huge win, right? So that was kind of the thought process, at least.
Something you mentioned too is the lower half of teams. And I think what a lot of people don't necessarily realize for things like, I think you're generalizing there, right? Where it's like, it's actually really probably like 70% of teams that fall into
Yeah.
that category or something that just don't have, resources for things. And many of us who are on, Chief Delphi, Discord, those social platforms that are out there, we don't necessarily get to see a lot of the other side of things, right? And I think hopefully, I'm sure you as a supplier have noticed this, in fun we have too, that there is such a different and in most cases larger grouping of people that fall into where these needs are that really need our help more than anything else.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the people that honestly need, and the teams that need the most help are the ones that aren't on Chief Delphi, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's usually a team that has one teacher, maybe two, maybe a parent that's helping them out, and like a handful of students that have never done this before. And it's hard to reach those people from what I've seen, right? Like, you can put everything out online, you can put all the resources out there, but at the end of the day, it's just tough to always reach everybody. But it doesn't mean you stop trying either, because that's how we get better, I think, as a program.
So I want to ask you, from starting it, I think you have kind of a unique story in terms of kind of as an entrepreneur where, right now for how much Thrifty Bot is doing, for you, not, I don't know how you can say, I know you work full-time hours, but you still do other things as well too, right? So I'd love to hear more about that, like starting it out as an entrepreneur, what difficulties were
Mm.
there? How did that process go? How did it go from like, hey, I'm still working a job and doing this and cranking out, just an incredible amount of sales and product and stuff. Tell me more about that.
Yeah. So, when we started it in 2019, like, it was out of our garage. At that point, it was so small, it wasn't even out of a garage. It was out of like a spare room.
Yeah.
Um,
The
and
old
we were only
farmhouse,
getting,
right? So
yeah, and we were only getting so many orders a day, right? So, part of it was working the day job and then having help from, I mean, a big part of this has been my wife, which, a lot of people have met Sydney. She's packed a lot of orders. She's pretty much done everything that I've done, right? Like, she's pitched in whenever I needed something. Without her helping out, like, this would not have grown nearly as quickly or as fast as it did. Um, so that's a big part, is like having someone there that can help you, I think, and accepting that help is a good thing. But yeah, like, we started just in the spare room and then moved to the garage as things expanded, and then as things continued to grow, okay, we're running out of room in the garage, we need storage spaces, so we started renting out storage spaces. um, and fast forward like 5 years later, we finally kind of hit that point of, okay, we need to get this out of our house and get it into like a legitimate commercial space where we can warehouse and more easily take stock of all our back stock and things like that. So um, that's kind of been the journey, I would say, of like where we started and where we're at now. And but it's all been kind of baby steps, right? Like, we've been really cognizant not to go too fast, too hard, and blow up our overhead and have a bunch of costs that we necessarily can't cover. Like, because we were still in our house at the time during COVID, like that helped immensely. And I know a lot of businesses struggled during that. We were pretty fortunate in that we didn't have a ton of overhead. I still had my full-time day job then. So the side hustle could just kind of coast, right? Well, we didn't have robots for a year.
That's something from my end too. When I look at, you mentioned something about growing too fast in many cases. Like, how do you balance that, right? Because I know I fall in the same book as that too, where like I don't want to all of a sudden look back and be like, where the heck are we now? Like, and what
Yeah.
direction are we taking for things? And I think some other owners and entrepreneurs might look at somebody like us and think we're absolutely crazy for not just pushing the envelope, as far as we can possibly go until, either we launch or we fall off a cliff, right? Like I definitely take that approach too. Of like, I'd rather just kind of be at a steady pace that I can manage. Like,
Right.
how do you handle that personally?
Yeah, I mean it's about sustainable growth for us too. I think as much as it is with FRC, but like we there's only so many hours in the day that I can do things, or that we like I do have we have employees now, so I do have an electrical engineer who's kind of managing that whole side of the fence, but there's only so many hours he can work on something, right? So I think we're kind of limiting ourselves on purpose in some ways by only having so many employees right now. And part of that is just trying to grow at a rate that I can manage. I think is kind of the challenge, because if we jump all in on this and things get kind of out of hand, I don't know how much I would be able to manage it at this point. But
Well, and
um,
advice is cheap, right? You're all, I don't know about
right.
you, but we solicit a lot of feedback from our community and things, right? So
Mhm.
we get that sort of thing, but then there's the business aspect of things that people are like, you should run your business this way or do it this way. It's like, I'm going to run it how I want to run it, right?
Yeah.
Where my vision
Right.
is, for things. And I'll listen to
Right.
my employees and stuff too, but you have to do it the way that you want to do it. That's going to fulfill you and honestly make you not just go crazy at the same time.
Right. Right. And totally agree. Like I know that obviously there's other vendors in FRC and they're doing things differently than the way we are. And that's totally cool. Like that works for them. They have a lot of employees. They help their community out a lot. Right now, we're just trying to kind of maintain things a little bit, but keep growth at a rate that we can kind of handle it internally, and then see from there. Like maybe once we've been in this commercial space for a year, we bring on a couple more people. But we're just still at that point where we've just gotten out of the garage, so to speak, right? So we want to see how this next step goes.
We hope you're enjoying this video here on Fun. If so, do make sure you click that subscribe button to stay up to date on all Fun YouTube videos and give the video a thumbs up. It really does help. We'd like to thank this show's sponsor, Kettering University, for their support of Fun. Those who are accepted at Kettering University are eligible to receive up to $5,000 a year in a robotics scholarship. Head on over to kettering.edu/first to get more information about Kettering University and the robotics scholarship. Over 30% of those who attend Kettering University were in high school robotics, so go attend somewhere that has so many other people like you at kettering.edu/first. I want to go back a little bit and talk about products for the Thrifty Bot here. You mentioned when you first started some of the initial products you had. When you first came out with the products that Thrifty Bot had, how was that received by the community? What kind of feedback did you get, and how did you learn and grow from that?
So the community's been pretty amazing, honestly. Like without all of them and the customers supporting us like they have, we wouldn't be where we're at right now either. Um, Feedback's usually pretty honest, right? Like sometimes brutally honest, which is good. Like I've learned to embrace that in a lot of ways, because most of the people, even if they're coming at you with some pretty pointed feedback, they're doing it from a place where they want to see you kind of grow and improve and do things better. Um, and I forgot what you were asking me.
Yeah, I mean, so it really
About.
comes down to like, when you look at how did that feedback maybe modify maybe your product offerings, or how did that change? Because I'm guessing you probably discontinued a couple products over the years as well too,
Right,
right?
right, right. Oh yeah, totally. So like just thinking some like challenges we had. Like the first time we dropped telescoping tube kit was before the 2022 season, right? And we didn't know what the game was or anything. We were just making that. We had been developing that since the summer that year. Um, And so like in all our testing, we were just doing straight vertical pull-up climbs. And it's like, yeah, we had these 3D printed internal sliding blocks that went inside the box extrusion. And like it held up great through a bunch of climbs. But again, we were just doing vertical pull-ups. And then we see the traversal in that year come out and all these 45-degree worst possible scenario grabbing, and those things just got absolutely destroyed that game. So we kind of had to scramble that year to come up with a fix for teams, and we did. I feel like we did a pretty good job. We made like a Delrin block that we've stuck with since then. Um, so like we had that one, and that was a lot of community feedback. We were like working with teams to try to make sure we got pieces to them before their event. So we were like emailing teams to figure out which week they competed, because then that would be when we'd be able to send them like a replacement piece the week before at least. So that's probably like our biggest oh crap moment, right?
Yeah.
That we've had since we've started. And I think every company, when you're doing stuff like this, like you're gonna have those moments where something doesn't go right. And
A lot of them, right?
yeah, and like you just got to own up to it. Like you got to be honest with people. You got to, especially the community here in FRC, that they're giving you their money, and you got to kind of honor that a little bit. I think the other thing that we discontinued was the first Thrifty Swerve, right?
Sure.
So like that was back in 2020. I think we came out with that. And I mean, it's amazing to see how much things have changed even within such a short period of time on the swerve landscape. Because back then, like we thought that was pretty good. Like we were coming out, it's like, okay, well, we got this kind of cool kit where part of it's 3D printed with Markforged printers, part of it is aluminum made. It was heavily inspired from the Strikeforce team's designs back then. And it just did not hold up to FRC competition, right? Like the forces that we started to see, especially with like brushless motors and stuff, that thing just did not hold up as well as we wanted it to. So that's why we discontinued it, just because we didn't want to start selling things that weren't going to hold up on the field. And we rolled a lot of lessons learned into the new one that we made. There's not a 3D printed part on that thing. Everything's super as beefy as we could make it on it. So teams should be feeling a lot better about that second version.
So I was going to say, looking at maybe some other products as well too. What do you think are kind of like what are like your hero products for things, right? What are your bread and butter products? Where what's keeping Thrifty Bot alive, right? When it comes to that standpoint, because when we have it's no different in any product offering. Some things do better than others. Some things are more popular, more profitable. There's a lot of different aspects that go into it. What are the key ones that you still have, and are there any other kind of major milestones that your company has kind of hit along the way to get there?
Yeah. So, I mean, the hero products have been kind of like the consumables, I think. And that was, again, one of the things we wanted to start with. And that's kind of what kept us going for a couple of years initially there. Is like, what are things that teams are going to come back every single season and buy, was the strategy. And it's been the hex bearings, all the bearings, and the hubs, really all the individual items that we produced before we started doing kits. We're super, there's still things we sell a good amount of every year. And then like coming out with those kits, the telescoping tube kit, the elevator kit are kind of the two big ones that cover a lot of ground in most games. So it gives teams a really nice place to start, I think. We see a lot of modification, or teams kind of have learned to adapt things for their own use cases. Those have been big, those kits each year. And then come down the pipe here, like we spent the last year, I would say at least, working on some new products that we're going to come out with. Thrifty Swerve V2 has been one that teams ran it in the previous season. That was a big one for us in that we wanted to get real battle tested data from an entire FRC season and see how this thing's going to break. So we had a couple teams run it for us. And that was huge. Like we learned so much from that.
What's kind of the timeline look like for some of those new products coming out as well too? Like, do you have a set date or anything like that?
So we don't typically, I mean, obviously we're trying to get things done as soon as we can,
Sure.
right? Like
Yeah.
I don't like releasing stuff right before build season ever. I want to get it out there as quick as we can, but then there's the other side of reality in that, like, if we get stuff made super soon, teams don't buy it until build season. So you're
Yeah. Right.
floating all this inventory. And I'm sure it's the same stuff that every other FRC vendor struggles with. It's like, you can get a ton of stuff made ahead of time, but you're going to float it for a little bit until build season comes around. So,
Can you walk us through what that product life cycle looks like in terms of development for things? Like when, I'm sure everyone's a little bit different, right? But in typical, like, how does it start? How does that development process go through until you're ready to actually sell it? And then how do you utilize the feedback from the community to change, improve, or modify your product?
yep. So we start really right after Worlds each year is kind of our thing, right? Like we have stuff that we've had designed for multiple years too that like maybe just didn't make the cut. So like you revisit that stuff and see if it makes sense to still make it. And after Worlds, we kind of sit down, see what the rest of the year is going to look like. It's not to say that we haven't been working on stuff during competition, build season, all of that, but to be honest, we're pretty busy then. So after Worlds, we sit down, we start looking at things, figure out what we want to make. If it's a mechanical product, in terms of like that life cycle, we start pretty much everything that we make starts, unless it's something massive or whatever, starts as a 3D print. Um, I've been a huge fan of 3D printing here for a number of years now. Like ever since we got the Markforged printers to do the vectored intake wheels,
Mm-hmm.
um, we've just been kind of riding that same process of let's do our early design and iteration and everything as a 3D print, kind of see how it works, and then after we feel pretty good about it, there get some actual metal part samples made and go and see how that works and get those on real FRC robots. Use the off season as a way to test those because there's just so many off season events that happen. And then that's really where like our Team Thrifty teams come in, is send them those parts, get those on actual robots from the previous year, get those in matches and just see how they hold up, get feedback. And then once we feel like it's good enough, ship it. start getting production versions made and get them up on the website. That's kind of how it goes.
So to kind of follow up on that, then one of the I think areas that you probably get a lot of community feedback from is that Chief Delphi thread that you have as well. I'm sure there's email, a few other mediums as well too, right? How do you handle those community interactions in terms of like there's always going to be these swings, and maybe you've been more fortunate than some of the other of us out there, in terms of negative interactions, things like that, right? But like, how do you you personally kind of what's your ethos on like, hey, somebody's mad. How do I help them? How do I fix it? Or how do I maybe move forward? And then on the other side, like when people are happy, is there anything in particular you do for things?
Yeah. So I mean, Chief Delphi is interesting, right? Like it's a place where like I've been on Chief since I was a high school student, right?
Yeah.
Like don't I'm sure I got some like really cringy, terrible posts from back then that are still on.
We won't bring any up. All right.
Yeah. But like it's kind of the one place everyone can go because people are going to see it, right? So I totally get when a team goes there and like starts a thread and is like, hey, this Thrifty Bot product is not good because XYZ. Because they know that like I'm going to see that, other people are going to see it and let me know. Yeah, so like how you handle that, right? It's usually one, post some kind of public thing saying, hey, like we're going to get in touch with you. And then usually we'll handle it offline if we can. Send them a message, follow up. A lot of times it's like if something's gone wrong with the part or product, like we just send them another one, right? Sometimes things fail. Sometimes things aren't being used the right way necessarily, but like we're not going to say, hey, this is your fault, like entirely, right? Like clearly there was some kind of miscommunication here. There's something that needs to be done better in our documentation. So a lot of times we try to learn from those failures too, right? Like we're trying to make the documentation side better on a lot of our stuff. Because again, it's like you're probably dealing with a team that doesn't have a lot of support. They have maybe one mentor, two mentors tops, and it's a lot of students that just don't have experience with this stuff. So like that's kind of been the way I've handled things, at least in the past, is if things aren't going super well, what can we do to make it right? And how can we help you, like learn how to use our parts, use our kits a little bit better? And can we point you towards other resources too? It's like, hey, maybe go read, some of these other examples or look at some of these other things.
I think it's easy sometimes to kind of that gut visceral reaction of like, why is this person mad? Why are they yelling at me right now? Right. Like
Yeah.
for things. And
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
what it comes down to is that somebody wants help, right? It's kind of customer service
Yeah.
101, right? When it comes down to it, it's
Yeah.
like, how do I address that need? This is the medium they chose to do it. The internet, people like to be loud and things like that, or maybe they just don't
Mhm.
know otherwise. Right. And
Yeah.
how you address it's, at least from my end, I always kind of have to take that step back for a little bit and not try to respond immediately when something comes out, right? And
Yeah.
craft that response in my head, maybe write it down somewhere else and things like that, and make sure. And sometimes for me, I even send it to somebody else to say, hey, this makes sense for what I'm saying right now, because what makes sense to
Mhm.
me might not make sense to others, for things. And yeah, it's interesting to hear, because people just want help in many circumstances. They're
Oh yeah.
frustrated, they want help on things they don't understand, or maybe sometimes you do, not saying you, but like the ball gets dropped sometimes. The communication
Oh
didn't
totally.
happen and things
Yeah.
like that too. And it's never intentional, right? But it's, how do I
Right.
then rectify that situation? I want to ask you as well too. I think an interesting thing is seeing when vendors get compared to other vendors. I'm not going to say one in particular or anything like that, but like, how do you what's kind of your reaction? You're like, hey, Thrifty Bot compared to this or something. Like there's a recent CD thread about,
Mm.
comparing Thrifty Bot Sword to another one as well. Like what is like you,
Yeah.
Ryan, like what is your reaction when you see stuff like that?
Well, I mean, again, it's just usually like a student who just honestly doesn't know. Like they're just going and asking questions, and like there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's cool, one, to like even be in that conversation, like as a
Oh,
as a
sure.
company. It's
Yeah.
kind of neat. It's like, oh man, that's cool. Um, but like yeah, like the SDS versus us swerve thread is the one you're talking about, and like Patrick and SDS totally changed FRC. Like I don't care what anybody says. Like it's insane how like you should be doing an interview with him next because he has done, I would say, like not obviously the same thing that we did it by any means, but we totally did things differently because he focused just on swerve. Like it's all awesome stuff that he developed with 2910. Had a CNC in his garage. I guess that's a similar thing, like the garage operation, but now he's moved out to into his space. And like my response in that thread was like, we really like what we did. We think we did some things a little bit differently, and but like either way, I think you're going to be good. Like if you really like SDS, like go get their stuff. Like you're
Yeah.
supporting Patrick, he's awesome. Like I don't think I'm never one to try to like shots fired or whatever, like throw shots at other vendors because like I know most of them and I legit think they're all trying to do good stuff and just try to like earn a living while doing something they love. So
It's an
um,
interesting eco space to be in, right? Because you're right. A lot
yeah.
of these people are friends of ours, right? And it's like trying to
Right.
figure out like, hey, like as a business owner, yes, I need to do my due diligence to make sure I'm doing the right thing for my company. But at the same time, it's not like I'm just going to say XYZ company is the worst thing. I'm not going to be disparaging and things like
Mhm.
that too. Well, it's that weird balance of like, and it's not even just the public look. It's truly how I think many of us feel for things. Are like, we
Right.
want many people to succeed out there. Now, like in fun, do I want fun to be number one and stuff like that? Absolutely. Like I love that
Mhm.
aspect of it. But there's also other content creators out there in my end, and if they want to do their own things and create stuff, I think that's great. And I would
Yeah.
imagine that that's a similar thing from a supplier standpoint as well, too.
Right. I mean, we're all trying to create products and do things that are going to make this program better at the end of the day. Because again, most of us have either been mentors or actual students now that we're on teams and have seen that there's needs for these things. And it's interesting because it's almost kind of become regional in some ways,
Mm.
right? Because like you have like us and Andy Mark and like CTRE are all Midwest, but then you have like West Coast products out there in California. Like obviously SDS is up there, Pacific Northwest. You've got the Last Anvil guys that have in Rev and Vex and those guys down in Texas. So Last Anvil is like a new one that's just kind of popped up.
Mm-hmm.
Got to talk to them at Worlds, super cool people. So like it's almost becoming kind of regional, right? Where you have all these companies that are kind of locating in major robot centers, I would say, and I think it's kind of cool because the teams that are usually local to them kind of support their local companies too, which is
Sure.
neat.
Do you find at Thrifty Bot that you are like you sell mostly in the Midwest, or because I think something like Thrifty Bot is kind of in a little bit unique space, maybe compared to a couple of the other suppliers out there. So like, where's kind of your concentration, or is it pretty widespread?
I mean, we're pretty widespread. We do a lot in the Midwest, though. We have a lot of. I mean, obviously, it helps that Michigan has the most FRC teams
right.
in the district, and they're right there, right? So
yeah.
a lot of
and
our
cheaper
stuff
shipping and stuff, yeah.
In a day, right? Even with ground shipping. So being in the Midwest, that helps a lot. Most of our stuff gets places in a couple days. It's really just kind of to the West Coast where it takes 3 to 4 days sometimes.
Couple final things I want to ask you. Earlier you talked about in 2020 when you developed the Sword Drive that you didn't really have any forward knowledge of the game or anything like that. But Thrifty Bot now is included in the Supplier Summit, and it's one of the things that Thrifty Bot got to go to amongst many other suppliers. I'd love to just hear more about what is the Supplier Summit. What information do you get for things? What are there certain things you can't talk about, things like that, or anything you want to share? Because I think there's a lot of people out there who hear about the Supplier Summit, but they don't really know kind of what goes on in something like that.
Yeah, so I mean, it's basically something for vendors, strategic partners, some of these companies that have donated, a lot of either material or funding to First, and the Dean's List winners all get to kind of come, and the Woody Flowers that now it's kind of all rolled into one event, but you get to go to Dean's house and kind of have a meal and get to meet and interact with all these different people it's kind of an interesting mix, right? Because like you have, especially with like the Dean's List students and then some of us vendors that are just like very much in the space, right? Like we're diehards. And then you have some of the strategic partners that are just kind of like there because their company donated a lot, right? So it's an interesting mix of people. And you get to interact with the First staff a lot too, right? So like they're the other piece to this. And it's super cool because you kind of get to see the vision of where First is going or what their plans are. I will say that like the First staff, I feel like has never been more like in tune with what the program needs in terms of what I feel right now.
A lot of First alumni now too, right? So
a lot of First alums are in pretty key positions. So like they know what it's like to have been on a team, and they know what the community's saying, right? They're really in tune with that, and so like I feel that's been a huge shift over the past couple of years, and so like you get to meet them at Supplier Summit and all that, and it's just kind of a cool opportunity to talk to all these different people. In terms of like getting info and stuff, I'm not sure it's even really that, right? Like it's mostly just kind of like a networking opportunity to talk to all these different people that are from different walks and different groups, and just kind of meeting people. By far the best thing is the Dean's List students.
Sure.
Like those winners, like you talk about some smart kids. Like they're awesome, super inspiring. Doing so much in high school, like it blows my mind. So it was really cool. This past year was the first year I actually went out to.
Okay.
And it was pretty neat.
No, it's great to hear and kind of get a little peek into what actually happens in those things as well too. Ryan, as we look to the future for Thrifty Bot as well, I think starting to make more public that Thrifty Bot has been in process or almost fully completed now, moving into a new warehouse space and starting to grow as a company and move forward for things. What's kind of your vision in regards to what Thrifty Bot's going to be in the next, couple years, 5 years, 10 years, if you thought that far, things like that? Like, what do you want to do, man?
Yeah. So I mean, we're kind of in this interesting point where we've put a lot of time and effort and funding into some upcoming products. Like I don't think it's any secret that we've been developing a motor controller, right? Like we've had it on our table at Worlds this past year. Um, like that's been kind of our big thing that we wanted to do and come up with. So hopefully, like that's something that's pretty critical. We've been looking at motors as well because we want to try to become a space or another website that teams can go to and almost be a one-stop shop to build
Sure.
your FRC robot. Like that's our eventual goal. Now, how long it takes to get there, it may still be a couple of years, right? Because again, we're trying to sustainably grow, not overextend ourselves too much here, but we're getting closer to that point where I think we're going to have almost maybe not the quantity that some of the other vendors have in terms of options, but at least have one option for each thing. If a team comes to our website and said, well, I can at least go get like this pulley or this belt or these sprockets from Thrifty Bot and make a robot out of it. So that's kind of our goal.
How do you maintain like the ethos of Thrifty Bot being like that, low cost solution for teams, things like that, or essentially what your name is, right? Like how do you
Right.
go about approaching that and staying to that in the future as well?
Yeah, so like it's not the easiest thing. I mean, I do a lot of the sourcing side of things, and it means that we spend time right up front looking at the cost of what things are going to cost us. Because
Sure.
if it doesn't make sense from a margin perspective, like a lot of times we just won't do it, right? Because there have been times where it's like, okay, we came out with a product and like we didn't make anything on it, and that was really hard, right? We
Yeah.
just spent a lot of time. Like that was the first Thrifty swerve, honestly. Like we dropped the price, should try to get people to buy into it, and like at the end of the day, we pretty much broke even on it. Um, so I spend a lot of time, especially up front, trying to make sure that our products have some margin built in for us so that it makes sense for us to do it, and then finding sources that can produce them at that price for us. That's always a challenge. um, but at the end of the day, it's like, we kind of struggle a little bit sometimes because we are Thrifty Bot, right? So
Yeah.
if we come in
It's
and
not
we're more
mostly Thrifty Bot,
expensive,
right? So
if we're more expensive than someone else, then that sometimes gets people upset, right?
yeah.
So it's tough, but we try to do the best job we can.
How about in terms of growth into other markets? Are you looking at like the FTC market more or outside markets at first or anything like that?
So I mean, we've had conversations internally about that. Right now, like our bread and butter is FRC because that's
Sure.
what we know. Obviously, with the FRC control system and the FTC control system going to be some form of cohesiveness, like that was in the proposal. They wanted to kind of be something that if you're an FTC, you can learn on it and then transition into FRC and not have to learn a whole new thing. So we've been talking about that as well with some of our products, things that we're developing. uh, would probably make a lot of sense to try to have some version of it that works for FTC, and then you could either bring that one into FRC, or there would be another version of it that was similar for FRC. So um, I don't want to give away too much,
Yeah.
but
Well, and you do have
like those
some.
those are conversations we're having.
Yeah, and you do have some products that kind of cross pollinate pretty well, right? Like your vectored intake
Mhm.
wheels, things like that, for
Yeah.
that too. So there's definitely possibilities, that if you're an FTC team, you could still go to ThriftyBot and find solutions for what you
Yeah.
want as well too. So, Ryan, a couple last things I want to ask you is in terms of like yourself, right? You're looking at when you started the Thrifty Bot, started that entrepreneurial journey for things. How have you changed? What are some of the greatest lessons that you've learned that maybe you could pass on to somebody that not necessarily wants to be a supplier, but just like wants to be an
Mm.
entrepreneur, wants to put in the effort for it, because it's a crazy journey.
It is. It is. So what I would say is that if you're looking to try to do something, you gotta take the leap, right? So I think about this all the time. It's like if I wouldn't have dipped the toe, so to speak, and like bought some of these hex bearings and was like, like, let's see what happens.
Yeah. It's terrifying
like,
too, isn't it?
Like none of this would have happened, right?
Yeah.
So, I think part of it is if you want to try something, maybe try it small to start. If you're going to try to start a business or try to start a company, like it's almost like FRC or robots in a way that you need to prototype it. You need to show that it's viable.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's what the hex bearings and the clamping collars and some of those early things did. They showed that, okay, maybe this can be a business and people like what we're doing, and maybe this could go the distance. So I would say, like, bootstrap some things, learn as you go. And also don't be afraid to reach out to people who have been doing this, because like getting advice from people is super beneficial, right? And a lot of times people are pretty willing to talk to you about things.
I think for me, one of the things that what I tell people is that I have never worked harder in my life for things, but I've also never enjoyed something so much as well too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like people, it's to a different level for things, right? And
Right.
I think the thing for me that I get most out of it, and I don't know about you, is there's freedom, but in a different way that I think a lot of people think about. Like, if I want to take off the day, I don't get paid, right? Necessarily, but on the other hand, I can take it off, right? And having things like that, you and I are both fathers with multiple children and stuff like that, and have a tight knit family for things. And it's like, I get to make that choice. And sometimes that choice is hard, but at least I get to make that choice for things. How does that feel for you? Like, where does kind of that freedom stand for you in terms of being an entrepreneur and a business owner?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same kind of thing, right? Like if something needs to get done, like I have to do it.
Yeah.
there's really no choice. So like in one way, it is like extremely, like you got to be willing to put in the work. You got to be willing to grind and get things done. Because if you don't, it's not going to get done. But at the same time, like you're saying, like, if you wanted to have some more flexibility, have some more freedom in what you're doing day to day, like it is super rewarding at times too. And then obviously just being able to, again, like provide for our families, like that's awesome, right? So like we're all trying to have a little bit better quality of life and do things for the people we care about. So that's kind of been what it's given me, I think.
No, very well said, Ryan, with that. Ryan, as we wrap up here, a couple things. First off, make sure you go to thrifty.com to check more out about it. You guys are, I know now, so you got Instagram is now too, so welcome that. Are you on TikTok now?
We made a TikTok last week, so we're trying.
All right,
and again, it's just me or like Sydney will like post something up on it. We don't have a social media team to follow us.
Not yet. Yeah. So, but yeah. And of course, on Chief Delphi is obviously a lot of great spots. Anywhere else that like, you want people to check out or see or get in contact with you, anything like that?
I mean, those are the main spots, right? If you want to, you can always get on Chief. You can always shoot me an email if you need to, the old-fashioned way. contact@thethriftybot.com is just go straight to my phone. And yeah, check out the website. We're going to have a lot of new stuff here dropping fall here before build season. So good, just kind of keep your eyes peeled. We tend to make Chief Delphi posts, as that is usually the way people see things, but we try to post it all on the social media stuff as well.
Well, Ryan, thanks again for coming on. Wish you best of luck, and I can't wait to catch up with you in person. I'm sure a couple times during the season. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, man. It's great talking to you. Thanks.
You too. And if you're interested in being on First Founders, and thanks again to Ryan for doing that, you can email contact@funroboticsnetwork.com. Or should you have any suggestions as well, too, let us know on there or on Discord or on the Chief Delphi thread, wherever you can get in contact with us. We'd love to hear your suggestions as well. That's going to be it for First Founders. We'll see you next time on Fun. Talk to you then. This video on Fun is brought to you by viewers like you and also in partnership with the following. Discover how Kettering University students engineered their success with Kettering's amazing co-op employment programs where students earn great pay and gain valuable experience. Those accepted into Kettering University can apply for a robotics scholarship, providing up to an additional $5,000 a year in tuition assistance. Head on over to kettering.edu/first to learn more and apply.